Hello, hi, how are you? This is Coach Aaron Saft and the Running is Life podcast. And I got a few little topics to kind of talk about today, especially with this being race week and Fierce Dragon being on Friday, January 16th. Pretty excited for that, so we'll kind of talk about that. But I want to kind of get into a topic first that has really kind of it's been something that's been returning, and I keep seeing it pop up with some athletes and some comments they make about their return to running, and feeling like they've lost so much, in regards to a number of different adaptations. And I have to remind them that those are specific adaptations that were worked on and can be regained rather quickly, and that's what I want to kind of get into, is talk about these adaptations. So these are just a few reminders to kind of think about as you maybe you're getting back into your own training, after a little break. One, we start with the supercompensation effect, and this is one we've touched on in the past, but always a great reminder to kind of talk about supercompensation. So what I like to envision, and there's multiple ways to kind of frame this, but if you were to see tiers or levels in a house, or in a building, right? Let's take that analogy. I think the doctors of running used it quite well, but we've got this building, and let's say 2025, with the training we did, we were able to build 3 stories, right? And let's say that we started in the basement. Okay, so we started in the basement, laid our foundation, and then we were able to build 3 stories up from the basement. Okay, and then 2025 ended. We've taken our break, right? So we've had this like reduction in fitness. Okay, so now the house has gotten back down, but our fitness doesn't go all the way back down to the basement. We don't start at that level. We've given our body this stimulus all throughout 2025 that's built us up. Again, 3 stories. So maybe we have, we're now starting on level 1 of the house. We've got the basement and level 1. So now we're starting with this new level of fitness. So, we should be technically faster. Okay. Average pace. Our general fitness should be on level 1 rather than at the basement when we're starting. That's the supercompensation effect, is that we have this higher level of fitness in the next training cycle. And this can be seen from cycle to cycle if the rest period is adequate enough that you've allowed your body to recover and adapt to all of the training that you've done. Now, that stuff comes back rather quickly. Okay, we can get that fitness back rather quickly depending on what we do. Okay, so it's not like we've lost a ton, and it just depends on how much time you've had to take off. There's a great article recently. I think Outdoor put it out in their run newsletter, and it kind of talks about what we can expect. How much do we lose? And honestly, we don't lose too much off the VO2 max if we just take 2 weeks off. Okay. If we're taking more and more time off, obviously the more and more VO2 max we lose. But again, can be regained. We'll talk about the VO2 max and doing anaerobic workouts in just a bit here. But understanding that, yes, we have taken a step back in fitness. We can't always maintain a high level of fitness. The body will fatigue, get tired, burnt out, injured, so we need that break. That's part of it. We always talk about that recovery. But that's the supercompensation effect, is starting at a higher level of fitness than you previously did in your last training block. Okay? Now, when we talk about adaptation in fitness, these can be things like speed, endurance, hill climbing ability, strength. These all take a step back, but these are adaptations that we can now start at a higher fitness level and get even better. That's the hope, that now instead of only building in 2026 to potentially the third floor again, now our hope is that we can, build into the fourth floor, potentially into a fifth, okay? So we can gain more fitness because we're starting at a higher level. That's the hope of 2026. And while, all of these things need to be rebuilt, you should have better ability to do them better if you, went through the basic principles of training, if you trained correctly and gave your body the time it needed to. Some of us don't allow ourselves to train correctly, and we wonder why we've stagnated. We wonder why we plateau, why we're not getting better. It's because we're constantly going too hard. Okay, I spent a lot of the end of last year talking about those metrics and why it's so important to understand how hard you're going on a daily basis. If you're stagnating and not seeing that improvement, it's because you're going too hard all the time, and the body can't make any adaptations because it's in a state of fatigue. Okay, so that's why it's really important to understand how hard you're going and making sure you're seeing those improvements. I've talked about in the past just running here on my road. My road is, it's flat dirt, but I can see, is my pace getting faster? Am I trending in a faster? So today, which is January 13th, I did a run here on my road and did this route that I've done in the past, and that's what's great because I can compare it to what I've done in the past. And you can look on Strava, you can look on Training Peaks. There, it kind of tells you, are you trending the right direction? Are you getting faster? Strava today was like, yes, this is, you're trending faster, right? So I'm heading in the right direction. Training is having its effect. I'm getting faster at the same heart rate, faster pace. Okay, so again, making sure you understand what the metrics are so that you are getting the improvements that you want to get. Okay. But all of these things, again, the speed, endurance, hill climbing, strength, these are all affected by that supercompensation effect. Okay. So you should be able to up yourself and get a new level of fitness, again, if you're doing it properly. How do we do that? We use the law of specificity in training, and that is we do the least specific to the most specific, right? So what we talk about, and I'll talk about an exception here because I think I'll get to that in a moment. But the least specific training, if I were doing an ultramarathon, the least specific to an ultramarathon is going to be my max VO2, right? Doing anaerobic intervals. That's the least specific. It's not that you can't do those, but you should do those earlier in the training cycle because you shouldn't do high volume and anaerobic intervals. You shouldn't do high volume and high intensity. It's a recipe for disaster, fatigue, injury, etc. So, that's done earlier in the cycle when the volume is lower because it's not as vital to what you're going to be doing in an ultra. We want to get that fitness level up. That's the benefit of doing max VO2 is we're able to sustain faster paces for longer periods of time because our fitness ceiling is higher. So that said, it's great to include those things. Actually, Ultra Running Magazine this past month had a great article about that. In their magazine. So it should be if properly used. And again, we're going to talk a little bit more about anaerobic intervals, but that's that would be the least specific. Now, the most specific, it would be like your endurance. Exactly, right? You're working on endurance, building your volume. Okay. And then we'll talk about, how in that last block, what that should look like. Now, same thing for marathon training. Now, the exception here, and what I want to stress, a lot of my marathoners don't do a lot of marathon pace. You are better time spent better doing lactate threshold workouts. Okay, working on your lactate threshold. You are better served by doing those type of workouts within a long run than you are doing marathon pace. Marathon pace will give you a mental advantage, understanding what the pace feels like, that you can do it, but physically, you're not getting much adaptations for that. That's reality. It's, marathon pace is at a heart rate that's really not working much within the aerobic system, unfortunately. So doing a lactate threshold workout is going to have much, much more value. Jack Daniels did a lot of threshold work within long runs. I have my marathoners that, one of their biggest workouts is 20 to 22 miles. I call it the JD special, the Jack Daniels special. There's 2 4-mile blocks of threshold within this workout. And then a lot of volume before, in between, and then after to get that remaining mileage, because you're doing 8 miles at threshold. So, in a 20-mile run, that's 12 extra miles, 22, that's 14 extra miles. So lots of volume in this run, but a good majority, 8 miles is done at LT to improve your lactate threshold. You'll benefit so much more in that last phase of training from lactate threshold than you will from marathon pace. So my marathoners, please understand that the value of lactate threshold versus marathon pace. Marathon pace is, like I said, every once in a while, it's great as a confidence builder, but in reality, it doesn't build much fitness. So please, especially if you're a coach, don't harp on marathon pace. Like this, we're so far beyond that now in science. I can't stand. I took that USATF marathon certification course, and they were harping on marathon pace, and I was just like, why? It's so antiquated training. Let's move into the new realm of science and understand that threshold is much better than running at marathon pace. Okay, so that would be my only exception. The last block of training, whatever it is, right before the taper, however long it is, be it 4 or 6 weeks, whatever it is, that is the block that you want to use that law of specificity. That would include heat training or altitude training, depending on the race and the specificity of the race. What do you need in that race? Do you need either or both? Okay, so that would be when you do that, is in that last block. Again, we're focusing that last block on what's important. Our ultra marathoners, it's going to be that volume. And again, I still hit a lot of threshold running in that last block. We do progression runs, some tempo workouts. That's still included in that last block for my athletes. Now, again, we have to watch fatigue levels, but at the same time, it's super important to kind of, again, keep working the system, keep looking for those improvements to the aerobic capacity that, we can sustain faster paces for longer periods of time. So that last block is super important to focus on whatever the event is going to present to the runner. Okay. If they're doing a mountain course, that's when we do the most climbing, right? We focus on, especially on the long runs, doing ascent and descent. Maybe we're throwing in some treadmill hiking, all that kind of stuff is that last block. It's not to say you can't do treadmill hiking along the way, but in that last block, we're focusing on what's going to be most important to the event, right? If it's a hilly marathon, then we're doing the workouts on something comparable, right? On a course that's comparable, right? If it's a road marathon, we're doing, a vast majority of our long runs on the road. Trail runs, we're being specific. How much single track should we be doing? How much climbing should we be doing? Getting more and more specific or event specific in that last block. And then again, depending on the workout, if we're 5K, 10K, that's a great time in that last block to work on anaerobic workouts. I caution again, with doing marathon and up, doing anaerobic in that last block. You can do a little bit towards the taper when the volume has been reduced, but when you're at peak volume, not really the greatest time to kind of throw in that anaerobic work. Again, we're creating a lot of fatigue during that time. The probability of injury or over fatigue is much higher. So I like to put anaerobic work a little bit sooner than that last block. Okay. Lastly, when we talk about specificity, strides, I believe strides can be put in throughout the training block. As you develop the base, you can start adding hill strides. I think that's super important. I keep hill strides throughout all my runners training, even my ultra runners. They'll do strides all the way through the maximum volume phase, the last phase of training. Even in the taper, I try to include strides. I think it's that important to kind of get that neuromuscular response, to keep the legs turning over, keep them fresh, and understanding that, it still can go fast. So I think strides are great to include all the way through your training block. So just a few reminders there. When we talk about adaptations coming back, be patient with your comeback. I spent a lot of time obviously building my base back. December being as much volume as I did. If you looked at how much time I spent in the 60 to 69% of maximum heart rate, it was a vast majority in that very, very easy, we would call it recovery jogging. I spent a lot of time in that zone. It would have been harder and harder for me to recover if I had kept pushing every day. I definitely would not have been able to do the volume that I did because of the level of fatigue it would have created to try to push every day into those higher heart rates. So, that base phase, again, be patient with it. Go easy. If you're already going to include some climbing, then just make sure the heart rate isn't getting too high, because we're cashing out every time that heart rate gets super high, right? That those mitochondrial deposits that we're trying to make on the runs, they're going to be withdrawn every time that you go into those upper heart rates. That high, beyond 87%, I'd say, of maximum heart rate. You're going to start cashing out on those mitochondria that you're building, and you're missing the point of that base building. So be patient, add climbing little by little, and be patient with the heart rate. If it's walking and having to take a little bit of rest on the steeper stuff, so be it. That's a lot of people ask me about that in my challenge, and that's what I did. I just started really slow. Sometimes it was just a shuffle, and that's what got my heart rate up. I would get my heart rate up to an aerobic threshold. I picked a cap of where my aerobic threshold was, and got up to that point. And then if I started getting near that, I would just, walk or slow down to make sure my heart rate didn't get too high. So I was just patient. And then what I noticed was that over time, I was just running faster and faster uphill and not getting actually near that aerobic threshold. Whereas like when I started, it was almost impossible for me to run some of the climbs. As I developed, then I could run, and I could run much faster, and I wouldn't even get near my aerobic threshold. It takes patience. It really does. It takes patience and time. If you give yourself that, that time and have those patience, you will see the results. It's simply just being patient with it. There's all of that. And, if you have questions, obviously, reach out. This is kind of the way I train my athletes, the way I train myself. And, it's, if you do it properly, you're going to see the results. So, all right. So as I said earlier, this week, on Friday, the 16th, I'm going to be racing the Frozen Toe 100K. So that's at the Fierce Dragon Races. We are starting in Vogel State Park in Georgia. The course depends on where you look. It's anywhere from 64 to 68 miles, depending on the person's watch. Anywhere from 16 to 19,000 feet of gain. Varying in what we'll get. Super challenging. The Duncan Ridge Trail, not a lot of switchbacks. It really just goes straight up mountains. So obviously significant amount of elevation gain. Weather is going to be pretty chilly. We start on Friday, so Thursday is supposed to be the coldest day out there. I'm hoping to volunteer out there, but we'll have to see how the weather is, because it's not supposed to get very warm at all, with the potential of some frozen precipitation. So, but hopefully Friday will be a little bit warmer. Looks like it should be around freezing, around 32 degrees on Friday and Saturday. Hopefully no precipitation on Friday or Saturday. We'll see. I'm bringing everything just in case. The Duncan Ridge Trail. I have raced the Georgia Death Race 3 times, the Duncan Ridge Trail 50K once, and Cruel Jewel 100. And I have one finish at GDR, one finish at the Duncan Ridge 50K, and 0 finishes at Cruel Jewel. So I am 2 for 5 for races on the DRT. So what brings me back there? Why go back? Like, it's a valid question that this course has crushed my soul so many times. And I think it's precisely that. As I, kind of talked about with the personal challenge that I did in December, my Masoji, I wanted that challenge. I wanted something that I knew would challenge me. And I wanted to use this mental approach of what I've learned in the Masoji in something that would challenge me. And I knew this course would do that. I'm excited by that. Kind of a side story here. The other day, I was building a Lego set. My family got me a used Volkswagen Beetle. It's a Lego that had been discontinued, so we found it. Somebody had it used because the new kits were super expensive. So we got this used kit, and what happened was I was missing some pieces, that I needed to finish it. So I ordered them. You can order them right through Lego and get whatever you're missing, and they came, but I almost lost the joy of the process because I was so fearful that I was going to have another piece that was missing, and that I'd have to order more pieces instead of just controlling the controllables. As I always tell my athletes, that, hey, if it's missing, I just have to order it. There's nothing I can do about it if it's missing. Just enjoy building this thing. That's part of the fun of it, and that's kind of what I enjoy. I've never bought a used kit, so usually it's new and I can just enjoy building it. But this the pieces came, and I just spent a few hours over the weekend just building this kit, and kind of got home, and I was like, I told my wife, I'm kind of relieved that, that it's done. I just kind of felt, kind of almost stressed that I was going to be missing a piece. And she says, why can't you just enjoy the process? And it was a great reminder for this weekend as well, to just enjoy the process of this event, right? Like, we often talk about training as the process, but a race is also a process. We have to proceed through a race just as we would in training, right? Like, and that's so awesome because of everything I just went through. Basically that last day of December, doing an out and back on the shut-in trail was in essence, it's kind of half of what I'll be facing at the Fierce Dragon, at the Frozen Toe. It's, in reality, it's almost the same amount of vertical gain and distance as what I'll be doing Saturday. So it was perfect. And that's why I did it. Of course, I kind of talked about, on the podcast how I got a little tired of being out there towards the end. It was, it was a long day, and I was tired from the whole experience, excited to be finishing up. But, I tried to enjoy the process for as long as I could. And that's what I need to do this weekend, is just go out there and enjoy it, not care what anybody else is doing, how fast they're going, whatever, I need to focus on me, what I'm doing, and enjoy it. Like, enjoy the being out in the woods, enjoy this opportunity. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that. We lose sight of, kind of enjoying the process of a race. We're so stressed out by everything that's transpiring around us. How fast are we going? Are we on pace? Are we this, that, the other thing? Should I eat? Should I drink? Like, yeah, I mean, those things are important, of course, but we shouldn't let them stress us out, right? That's the big thing, is that, again, we have to remember to enjoy the process, enjoy what we're doing, enjoy being out there, enjoy the fact that we're able to do these things. It's for the love of running. And that's I think that's the biggest takeaway, is do it for your enjoyment, do it for the love of running, and I mean, we always talk about our whys. I think that's, this is a big piece of that. And if we include that in our why, it gives us a lot of resolve, something to fall back on, and there's been times where, I really, I talked about, High Lonesome, where that really challenged me because I started throwing up, before 50K. I still had like over 70 miles to go, and it made it really legitimately hard to enjoy the event. I had to stop and kind of look around and remind myself of the surroundings, what I was there for. I had to dig deep into my why, which part of it was just so I could see my daughter at mile 96 so she could run me into the finish because she was looking forward to that. So these things are extremely powerful if we make them such. So, understanding that, these opportunities we're afforded are so precious. They're so meaningful, and we can learn so much about ourselves. And that's the thing, is that I reminded myself of that through the Misogi. And that's, again, what I talked about is that it's supposed to be hard. And yes, if I recognize that, it helps me kind of recenter and find my enjoyment again, because I recognize I'm right where I should be in a hard place, and I'm working through it. So I'm excited for this 100K, and, hopefully, we'll see what it brings, but, hopefully I make it through and have a great race and have a good time, and I'll bring back some stories for you. As we're, wrapping this up, the next thing I got to do is pack. So I'm throwing everything in the kitchen sink in my bags, throwing in micro spikes and, 2 sets of poles and 2 sets of gloves and waterproof gloves and waterproof jackets, base layers, long tights, underwear, all sorts of stuff, just to make sure I have exactly what I need out there, so that, that doesn't become an issue. I have what I need to be out there, so I can put my mind at rest at that. I've got plenty of different foods. I'm trying to, find everything I can to make this as successful as I can. I dug through some of my gear, and I found these tubes. They are, I was talking about, how my tubes froze in the last few runs, during December. I found these tubes that are supposed to keep your tube from freezing. Now, with some of the temperatures we might face, there might be nothing that prevents it from freezing. But we'll kind of see. I found these tubes, and they're supposed to be better in colder temperatures. So I'll put those in the show notes so you can check them out if you're having any problems. I'll put I'll try to find the link for them. They came with my bladder from, I think it's Hydro Flask, but I'll double check it for us and put it in the show notes so you guys can check them out if you're having any issues. But yeah, I plan on using the new RAB 12 liter vest. I'm bringing with me a Salomon Advanced Skin 12. The one that I have been using for years is starting to get a bit ratty. I have one that's in pretty good shape, so I'm bringing that. I've got my Lecky poles ready to go. We're going to start in the Ultra Lone Peak 9 Plus. That's what I did. The shut-in, double shut-in in those. So I'm going to bring those. Going to bring a pair of Mountain Racers, Mountain Racer 4s. Going to bring a pair of the Olympus 275s. Just going to, make sure I have an arsenal of things that I can switch out to if I'm having problems. I've got both Injinji and Exotoast socks. So, different socks if anything's going wrong. So yeah, just like I said, just having options. So I make sure that I'm ready to tackle, this beast. I've got 2 different light belts, both from Ultra Aspire. I've got 2 of my Petzl Swift RLs. So, just like I said, trying to be prepared. So if anything happens, I have backups. And like I said, I can put my mind at ease knowing that I have backups, and that I can grab something else if I need it. So pretty excited, as you can hear in my voice. Excited for this opportunity, excited for the first race of 2026. Just looking forward to getting to the start line and getting this thing going. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. I will say, again, if you're looking for a coach, want to talk about coaching, please reach out. All the ways you can reach me are in the show notes. Really hope you enjoyed last week's podcast on giving yourself grace. That one meant a lot to me. So I thank for those of you that reached out and said how you enjoyed that podcast. Really meant a lot. So thank you all so much. And thanks for being a part of the podcast. Until next time, keep moving forward, my friends. Running is life.